Howdy, and welcome to an episode of Life with Professor Retro. Today I'm going to tell you a story about my trip to the New England area back in 2015, where I went with my mom and my aunt. The original purpose of said trip was to pick up my cousin who was going to college in New York. So, we drove from Waukesha, Wisconsin, because we had to pick up my aunt, all the way to New Jersey to do 3 days in New York, where we saw, the first day we were there, we went to do the 9/11 Museum. That is comprised of 3 different areas, well 4 if you count the Infinity Fountain. It's free to go to there, but you have to make appointments ahead of time because everyone's going there. The first area is a big area where you can see some of the bigger attractions, some of the bigger things where they've got the radio tower that fell from the top of the trade towers, one of the fire engines that had a radio tower fall on top of it. Then there's the 3 hallways which represent each of the 3 towers that fell. And then there's inside of that, there's a smaller museum that's got all the smaller artifacts from that day. That is a more kind of somber area where you're not allowed to really take any pictures, but just kind of look. And they got some videos showing you of that, and some videos of some audio recordings of some of the news that went on that day. And then they got something interesting, which I don't think they really had interesting, because at the time I was there, a prominent news anchor got fired from his job for lying about being at a war zone. I think his name was Brian Williams, I'm not sure. Correct me if you know the story, correct me in the comments below. I will not get mad. And they had him do an audio-visual exhibit there. And yeah, that whole ordeal was sad. Not going there, but what caused that museum to come into existence was sad. Then we went and took a hop-on-hop-off bus tour of different attractions. I don't recommend taking the hop-on-hop-off bus tour. 3/4 of the tour guides. Well, I recommend taking it, but I don't recommend getting the VIP pass. Let's just say that. We'd gotten VIP passes, which were supposed to allow you to skip everyone else in line and be the first person to get on the bus. Not one single tour guide actually honored it. I think one did, but most didn't. They saw that and they basically think they laughed at you to themselves of how stupid you are to spend money on something that they're not going to honor at all anyway. The next day in New York, we then went to go see the Empire State Building and Grand Central Station, and we did pass by the Flatiron Building. We then took a bus to some of the other parts of New York, and then after we left New York, we then ended up going to Philadelphia. We saw the Liberty Bell, we saw Liberty Hall. I had a true, honest-to-God Philly cheesesteak sandwich, and trust me, you haven't lived until you've had a true, honest-to-God Philly cheesesteak sandwich. You can make them by buying certain things in the store, but nothing is like going to a street vendor and buying one. And after spending a day in Philadelphia, we headed towards Gettysburg to go see Gettysburg. We took a tour there. The tour guide was rather kind of interesting because everyone talks about ghost stories and seeing ghosts at Gettysburg's funeral, but he said, you know when ghost stories about Gettysburg came out and people started claiming to see ghosts? 1980s. A couple Wisconsin people actually served in that war, in the Civil War. Then you got to go see where Lincoln gave his famous Gettysburg Address. A little bit of history that I actually learned there that they don't tell you in history class in school or in social studies in school. If Lincoln could have ended the war without ending slavery, he would. But he knew that the only way to end the Civil War was to officially abolish slavery. And then end up getting shot in Ford's Theater by John Wilkes Booth and two other co-conspirators. Then from there we headed to Boston, which was the actual purpose of the trip, to go to Boston. And there we took a hop-on, hop-off bus tour. So we saw what we call Faneuil Hall. They call Faneuil Hall. It's a famous area where a lot of historical places are. Nowadays, it is a giant restaurant shopping area. Basically, giant restaurant area. Like it's a giant food court, but it's still kind of neat because they got a lot of interesting food vendors there. Which leads me to going to drive past Bunker Hill Memorial, which there's an interesting story about that. Bunker Hill Memorial is actually not built on Bunker Hill. The colonists read the map wrong and they built it left of Bunker Hill. Now, I heard that from a tour guide, so, he could have said something like that to make the tour interesting. What he did do that he shouldn't have done, but he did because all of a sudden his boss wanted him to do it. So a little bit of history at that time. We were there. The now retired New England Patriot Tom Brady finally was able to talk about the infamous Deflatorgate incident. Now, if you don't know what Deflatorgate is, I think it was a couple years ago prior to this. The Patriots were in the Super Bowl. In order to win, if you know anything about the New England Patriots history, their team are notorious for cheating back then. I mean, their team is the reason why now, if you ever watch football games on TV, especially NFL games, you notice that when the camera goes to show a coach calling the plays to the team, they always have their call sheet covering their mouth. Well, the story goes, the reason for that is, back in the day, the Patriots would have someone sitting on the opposing team's side in the audience, in the stands, with a pair of binoculars. And they would go, and they'd point those binoculars at the opposing team's coach, and read the lips of the call, and then relay that call to the Patriots coach at the time, so they could win. Now, ever since then, they cover their mouths with their play call sheet, so that in case there's someone actually doing that, again, they can't get the play calls because you can't read the lips. Deflatorgate, now back to Deflatorgate. Deflatorgate is the fact that the New England Patriots took a game ball, one of the game balls that was going to be used during the Super Bowl, and they slightly deflated it so it wouldn't go as far, so when the opposing team tried to kick it or pass it, it wouldn't go as far as it's supposed to, which would give the Patriots the upper hand in the game. And after that incident, for years, I'd have to say, for at least 2 to 3 years, Tom Brady could not even talk about it. Until, I think, 2015. Now, if I'm getting some of this information wrong, please let me know in the comments. But then he finally was able to talk about it. So we're sitting on this tour guide in Boston. And Tom Brady at the time was living in Boston. I don't know if he still is. And the tour guide says, I'm not supposed to do this, but I'm going to try to take you as close as past Tom Brady's house as I can. I'm sitting next to my aunt, and I said, I wish I could throw a brick at his house. Or at least a deflated football. Because, contrary to popular belief, yes, that year the Patriots won, during Deflategate by cheating. But there are still at that time there were still a couple Patriots fans that were pissed off as about how they won. Then, while in Boston, we saw part of the Freedom Trail. We went to see Paul Revere's house. Paul Revere not only was the person that said the British were coming, but that's another piece of history that classrooms got wrong. Paul Revere himself was British. Why would he say that the British were coming when he's British? That just would make no sense. What he actually said was the Redcoats were coming. And Paul Revere was back in the day, what's called a silversmith. Which basically means he would make silver jewelry, silver was where we get the term silverware from silversmith back at that time. Because all silverware was made with actual silver back then. Then we went to go see the Old North Church. Now, if you're going to Boston, there are a couple of churches that all look alike. But you'll know the Old North Church because in front of the Old North Church will be a statue of Paul Revere sitting on his horse. That's your sign that you have finally made it to the Old North Church. Then we took a trip out to Eastern State Penitentiary, which is also in Boston. Or is it in Philadelphia? One of the two. I think it's in Philadelphia. But we did do Eastern State Penitentiary. A lot of famous people actually got imprisoned there. Al Capone has. You could actually see Al Capone's cell, which literally is one of the nicest cells in the entire building. There's an exhibit there that literally shows you the number of people imprisoned throughout the country on a kind of like a graph, and we are the country with the highest people in prison. Highest number of people in prison. Let that sink into you. Then we at the time, one thing you can see in Boston at the time, there's two very prominent warships that are always docked in Boston. There's a old World War II battleship, and there's a battleship that Revolutionary battleship. Both actual intact. When we were there, sadly, we weren't there because both ships were in what was called dry dock for repairs. What that means is they take them out of the water, put them into buildings to get repairs done, maybe replace worn out pieces before they put them back into the water. And that takes years to do, so we didn't get to see that, sadly. We did take a harbor tour, or if you're from Boston, it's called a harbor. Harbor is usually spelled H-R-B-O-R. But if you're in Boston, it's spelled H-A-B-U-A-R. Harbor. Then we had then taken a trip out to Martha's Vineyard. Unfortunately, when we were there, the tour there was done, so we just had to enjoy the little sights walking around Martha's Vineyard. I forgot to mention, when we were in New York, we also went to see the Statue of Liberty, which is a must. To get to Statue of Liberty, you have to go to a very historical park known as Battery Park. And Battery Park has what is called the immigration station, which is where the immigrants at that time that immigrated from other countries to the United States went through. And when you go there, you could actually see, you could go into computers and you'd actually see how many of your distant relatives were immigrated to the United States. Little bit of history, yes. Going around taking pictures of women up women's skirts is illegal, except when you're inside of the Statue of Liberty. You can go as high as the pedestal. They used to be able to go as high as the torch. I think you can go as high as the torch, But you used to be able to go all the way up to the very top of the statue where you can look out. Now you can't do that. We did see the Empire State Building in New York. You can't go all the way to the top, but you can go up to the 86th floor, which is still high enough. Then, after we were done in Boston, we went to pick up my cousin and drop her off at her boyfriend's house, well, now her fiance's house, at the time, her boyfriend's parents' house, and we had a lot of heavy stuff. Like we had her mini fridge that she had in her dorm, and we get there. My mom goes, help her boyfriend's dad, who was a retired firefighter and now was delivering for UPS, move my cousin's little dorm fridge. So I go to try to help this guy, and this guy literally takes this heavy-ass little dorm fridge and just, in one fell swoop, picks it up and walks it to his garage. Like, it was nothing more than a light box of books or something. We finally then headed home after touring some more of Boston, and we did drive a few things when we toured Boston. We drove past the bar featured in the old 80s TV show Cheers. We didn't get to go in it, but it's there, it still exists. We passed the Barclay Center, where the Boston Celtics play. I think that's about it for that trip. We then headed back once we headed back home, some places to eat some places to go eat when you're in Boston area. There's a place called, I don't think it exists anymore, but we ate at a place called Friendly's. Really good food, but you can also get some really good ice cream sundaes there. Like I said, it did have a honest-to-God Philly cheesesteak in Philadelphia. Trust me, you have not lived till you've seen that. Then, years later, after I had married my now wife, Jill, and my dad had passed, we had went to Massachusetts to spend some time hanging with her Uncle Jim, who's a really great guy. And I should have taken my camera out then, because in his backyard he has an entire collection of old war vehicles. We did try to go to Boston, but at the time we had went, they had an event going on, and I really wish I could have taken my wife and my stepson around Boston and taken a bus tour around Boston and everything else, but we didn't. So, that was our trip. That was my trip to New England area to New York to pick up my cousin in Boston. Thanks for watching this vlog. I am, of course, Professor Retro, reminding you to always do good in the world. Peace out, stay frosty, and, of course, see you in the next one.